Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your girl Mitzi, and this is Mitzi. Let's think about it. Today we are thinking about the subjectivity, oh my goodness, of the word normal. Oh my goodness, I am so excited to think about this with you guys because I have been waiting for somebody to tell me that this is a good topic to think about. And luckily, I have Danika here who's going to really help us think about this in a whole new way. So thank you so much, Danika, for coming onto my show, sharing your time and your perspective. I am ready to dive in. So when you hear those words, the subjectivity of the word normal, what does that make you think about?
Well, for me, it's all about time, place, and perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also your history.
Mm.
And also, thank you for having me on here, Mitzi. You made that a very long-winded intro. I wanted to say thank you before we started. So I'm very excited to be here and talk about this because this is something that I've written about for a very long time, and something that whenever I talk about travel, which is often, just because I'm such a big traveler and I try and encourage other people to do so, this is one of the reasons why I, it's one of the best reasons to travel, I think, for yourself in terms of when we talk about personal growth. Um, and when I think about normal, I think about, you know, going to somewhere new and how can we learn new versions of normal, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you normal is different everywhere, and that's kind of like a grand scheme of like what I wanted to talk about today. But I'd be happy to hear like what questions, because you just mentioned, you've been thinking about this for a while and wanting to talk about it. So what like questions or thoughts have you came up with that you wanted to like explore?
Well, the reason why I've been wanting this to be a topic on my show, because first thing, I don't come up with the topics. The guests find me, or I find the
Yeah.
guest, or you know what I mean, vice
Hmm.
versa. And then with the guest already knowledge, then we come up with a title that really makes sense for the situation.
Hmm.
So the fact that this is the topic, it makes perfect sense because I think people need to really realize that you're normal in one part of the United States or just in these United States alone is not going to be the same normal across the country in a whole new world. You know what I mean? So I think just bringing that perspective, just because I have a wide audience all across the United States and across around the world, so it really
Hmm.
brings value to everybody so that they realize how they do their normal routine in, let's say, Europe, South Asia, Australia, you know what I mean? It's going to be very different from the way people do it here in the United States or up in Canada or anywhere else. So it's just about having that understanding that your objective and how you live to survive is going to be different. And I think that in the fact that you have that traveling experience and you know how you had it to adapt from one country to another country, that right there is so crucial for people to really think about, because that having that adaptability is so important,
Yeah.
because we really do need to adapt to accustomed to other people's way of being and way of working through life. Because for
Hmm.
some reason, people in the United States, they think, oh, if you come to this country, you need to accommodate and you need to learn the language and you need to adjust yourself to already be accumulated to this environment. But are you
Hmm.
willing to do that when you go travel to another country? You know what I mean? And I feel like
Yes.
that's where a lot of people don't have that understanding and that recognition. So it's just like, for you, when you traveled, how did you develop this adaptability?
Yeah. So I think what's funny is that you kind of either do it by force, which can be an uncomfortable experience, right? When you go somewhere that's very foreign. So for me, one of the biggest trips I first did by myself was traveling to Sri Lanka and India, which is completely different to how life in the States or here in Canada is. Um, and I think it's kind of hard to explain this in like one little nutshell, but I think what happens when you go somewhere very foreign is you can either let yourself embrace and adapt to what's around you with a curious mindset, or you can put up a wall and try and like force yourself to stay in what is normal to you.
Yeah.
Um, one is harder than the other. So obviously, if you can go about it in a more flexible way and in a way that you are eager to learn about, How do people greet each other here? How do they interact with friends? What do they do after working day? Like, what do they do on the weekends or what,
Yeah.
just simple things that are just like daily life and like routine. But um, it's important to like learn about that, I think, in order to embrace this new version of normal, whatever it is. And why I think it's important to embrace that new version of normal is because it develops a sense of compassion. And
Hmm.
compassion is I mean, you can develop that by not leaving the country, but what happens when you go somewhere that's very, very different from your normal is that you end up being the person that is out of place or foreign, right? So then you think, oh my gosh, like, uh, you know what it feels like to be that person that's like othered. And people that, we live in countries where there's a lot of people immigrating. So we see people experiencing this every day, but it's important, I think, to have that experience and know what that feels like. And once you're in that position, it's very easy to understand and have that sense of compassion for being outside your normal.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
for me, when I talk about what can travel teach you really fast is compassion. And that's my
Oh,
number one. Like it's like compassion and tolerance, right? Tolerant
right.
of different normal and compassion for other people, whatever their history is, whatever their background is, understanding that, you know what, the way they do everyday life is different from me. It's not a problem. It's something to embrace and, have fun and learn more about. So that for
Yeah.
me is like the whole, if I were to wrap travel in one big thing, I feel like that is the most important, that connection and learning compassion.
Oh, absolutely. Because I think people are forgetting about compassion. You know what I mean? We're so
Hmm.
we're developing this self-centered mindset where it's
Yeah.
all about me, myself, and I, and we are
Mm.
losing this compassion and this connection between human beings. And I think when you travel, it puts things into perspective. Like I
Mhm.
knew a friend where whenever she would travel with her family to different countries, she would do an Airbnb at the place and then have their kids understand what it costs to buy milk there, what
Mm.
how to shop there, and how to
Yeah.
really get the understanding of what it's like to actually live in that country so that they can gain that compassion, gain that understanding and have that value for where they are at home. Because if they realize
Mm.
like, oh, a gallon of milk in Jamaica is like $10 versus in Florida that's only $4, well then they're gonna
Mhm.
have that understanding appreciation, and then they're gonna also understand the value of money. And I think
Yeah.
that's a good thing to really start teaching the youth, is understanding the value of money and understanding the value of emotions, because our emotions really does so much to unite us. You know what I mean? And when we have that compassion of how somebody from somewhere else has to walk miles on end just to get to school, or they have to travel through a river instead of a road or a highway to get to a school, then that really
Mm.
brings you into an understanding of like, wow, I really value where I'm at. I really have that understanding that I'm in a good place. It's not all
Yeah.
that bad. And I don't think a lot of
Mhm.
people have that understanding. So when you talked about compassion, I
Mhm.
think that really does hold so much value, and we're
Yeah.
losing that into to a degree that we don't feel like we have to have compassion on anybody. Everyone's like, oh, all for themselves and one for themselves, and I can cut
Mhm.
people off as easy as they come. And it's like, what about the compassion? When you are needing a compassion, don't you seek it, or are you mad that somebody else is not giving you that compassion? You know what I mean? So it's just like
Mhm.
people don't realize like it's a two-way street. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. It matters if you still have that understanding that you're a human being and your life matters, and how you're seeing life and how you're moving through life matters. And I think just understanding that is more appreciative. And I think when a lot of people from the Caribbeans came to the United States, it was a hard process for them because they're not realizing that they do things differently. They care for their animals differently. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
just having that understanding of what we could see as normal is not always normal in another place really brings that value of just like, huh, that appreciation, that gratitude, and as we keep saying, compassion.
Yeah, yeah. But I know I agree with you. Like a lot, I feel like we lost a lot of it. I felt a really big shift. Like I know people always bring this up, but like after like COVID and stuff, like there was
Yeah.
such degrees of separation in terms of like, you know, this is my opinion And if you're not on this side, then I don't agree with you. I can't be friends with you.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me, you know? Like, I
Yeah.
feel like, having these experiences and, developing that sense of compassion is understanding, we might have a difference in how we view different aspects of life, but that doesn't mean that we can't coexist.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
yeah. So for
Exactly.
me, yeah, I really notice a shift. Like every time I come back to North America, I see things like just in a new way. And I see the
Yeah.
difference between, like you said, I feel like it's oftentimes here, not all the time, because like I do value a lot of things here, and I think there are a lot of good communities, but I think a lot of times it's very much a solo journey here. Like you gotta just everything is on your own, like it's all by yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like a lot of other places that I've been to, it's more emphasis on community and how can we do things together and share. So
Oh, I agree. I mean, I think the movement that in North America they're trying to push is that individualistic mindset, that
great.
individualistic, we only need yourself, and I, you know what I mean? You don't need anybody. You don't even need your family. You know what I mean?
Mm,
And
mm,
it's very hardening because like you said, when you go out and explore different countries, you know, you really see that community. You really see that in the culture where
yeah,
everybody does things together and they try to make sure everyone's included, that everyone feels seen, they feel heard, they feel valued. And
yeah,
here it's like I don't know where this mindset has been acceptable and why it's being acceptable, but we're losing empathy. You know what I mean? We're losing
yes, yeah.
that factor of what makes us human, you know what I mean? And the fact that we
Mhm.
have these emotions, and I think when we realize that this normal that's being pushed in North America should not be normal in other countries. They should value their culture, the way that they have. You know, like in certain parts in Southeast Asia, they value their dead even when they're passed. They still have them among them. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
They still
Hmm.
celebrate their life even though their life is no longer in the body. You know, and I
Hmm.
think that's something that may be taboo for a lot of people, but it just shows how valuable somebody is even after death. You know what I mean? That their life still had a big impact and their legacy is not some park with a patch on it. You know what I mean? Saying that they were there or
Yeah,
they donated some
yeah.
money, but it's because they made an impact in their community and they were well thought of and they had value in one way or another. And just I think more people should be exposed to the opportunities of travel so that they can gain
Hmm.
that context, because without context, you don't have the character development in them. So it's like context develops that character, because if not, then we lose that compassion. And then we have this like, oh, well, they should do better. They should know better. They should act better. And then we're like, oh, common sense isn't common. Common sense will never be common because what's common to survive in one part of the world is not going to be common in another part of the world. And even in the same block, someone's going to survive differently on
Yeah,
that block differently versus another. So no matter even if you're in the same continent or not, you common sense will never be common because we all were taught to survive differently and we were all
exactly.
brought up differently. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. So for you, when did you realize that you needed to start shifting your perspective in a different manner?
For me, it's funny because I talk about this like in my writing a lot, but I wanted to mention like yes, all this community, but I think what is also so key in this too, and kind of segues from what you said, like when we develop that compassion and empathy for all these people around us, we say, oh yeah, there's so many different ways of doing, there's so many different types of common sense of what's normal. Then all of a sudden, for me, when I started traveling solo, I was having a lot of like internal struggles in terms of like my identity and what I wanted to do with my life. And then when I went away and I started to see all these different ways of normal, all these different ways of doing and values and morals and things, I started to think, oh my gosh, I can I can live life in so many different ways that I didn't even think about.
Yeah.
And that changed me. And then from there, it was just like, oh my gosh, then I was so excited to learn more and more. The new places I went, I was like, okay, well, like, how do you view like happiness in life? What's your view on success? How do you value like family in your life and work? And like, I just was so excited to learn more about how people live their lives in all these different places in order to think about, okay, how can I make my life in a way that is fit for me too? And
Yeah.
that was like the sort of game changer for me. So that was like years ago when I started to shift the mindset. But it was definitely like me going through a hard time personally and trying to find my place, um, is what sort of instilled that sense of like, okay, how can I see other people and like, let's explore this. That was
Oh,
the game changer for me.
oh, I love that because it just makes it so valid. Like we don't realize that we can pick and choose what we like
Yeah.
and make it and embody it. You know what I mean? It's
Hmm.
it's our narrative, you know what I mean? We can choose the beliefs that were either bestowed upon us through the generations that we were exposed to, or we can adapt new ones from different values that we see that are now what we want to embody. So if you want to embody more a compassionate lifestyle, a more welcoming lifestyle, a more generous
Hmm.
lifestyle, then you can do that. But it's your choice. And I don't think a lot of people realize it's a choice. You know what I mean? We have so many more choices that can give us this power of knowing or even not knowing, but it's a choice, you know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think a lot of the times people forget that. And when you were talking about that, it made me think of Alice in Wonderland, the Ticking Clock, the second movie, where
Yeah.
she comes back and she has this full getup of this Asian culture style clothing, and it was super colorful. And then when she went back to Europe, they were like, "Why are you wearing that? That's not
Yeah.
customary here." And that's throwing everybody off. And then she was just like, "Well, it was fine for the prince of whatever, then it should be fine for you." You know what I mean? Like this is customary in Asia. Why isn't this
Yeah.
why can't you accept it
Yeah.
here? And they were
Yeah.
like, "Because it's throwing us off." And I think that's the thing
Mhm.
that a lot of the times things throw people off. But if it
Yes.
throws you off, then adjust yourself. That gives you the
Yeah.
opportunity to adjust yourself, reframe what you're
And
seeing.
think, why does it throw me off? Like ask questions. You
Exactly.
got to ask why. That's one of my other things. Like I feel like a lot of times when we see something different, and this also has to do with like, changing our perspective on normal, like when we see something that's different from what we are used to, instead of asking like, oh, that's weird, I don't like it, like that tends to be like the norm for humans because we have a problem with change often.
Hmm.
But when we start to ask, oh, like, why can't we do things this way? I I use a silly example all the time, and I'll use it now. Like when I was in India, I was living with some coworkers of mine who were Native Indians, and obviously I was the only girl from Canada in the house. And I was making breakfast, like oatmeal, with like some cinnamon, some raisins, like a little sweet kind of thing. And then I, I once gave it to my coworkers, and they were like, "That's disgusting." Or like, what's in this? And then my coworker instantly went to the cupboard, grabbed like masala spice, like chilies, whatever, and put it in the oatmeal. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. And then like days later, I go to the supermarket, which I've been before. I don't know why it just stuck out to me that day. But then I'm seeing like those instant oatmeal packets of like masala oatmeal. I was like, well, had I not, like, I didn't think about that, but like, how silly is that? Like, I think like oatmeal has to be this way.
Yeah.
Whereas that doesn't necessarily have to be the case, but we are just so used to that. So for me, all of a sudden, instead of being like, oh, that's weird, like, why would you do that? Or him vice versa, saying that to me, like, what's the cinnamon up in your oatmeal with the raisins or whatever? It was just a moment of me thinking, hey, you know what? Like, this is how I need to look at other situations, not as simplistic as oatmeal, but it's a good feasible thing for us to like think about. Like, we can do breakfast in 1,000 different ways. You don't have to have toast with eggs. Like it can be a bowl of noodle soup. Like in Vietnam, that's very normal to have hot noodles in a soup like for breakfast, whereas we would
Yeah.
never really think of it that way, right? So
Absolutely.
just food in general is like a kind of interesting way to like think about what's normal. And
Oh
once you
yeah.
bring that mindset of, instead of saying, why do you have it this way, think, why not? Why can't you do it in all these other different ways?
Exactly. I mean, we could even go back to even when you're in school, you're taught basic math, 1 + 1 = 2, but then you're like, oh, but you can also get 2 by 5 - 3, and you also get
Yeah,
2, but why is that a
yeah,
problem? Oh, because I taught you 1 + 1 and you need to stay that way. Like, no, there's many ways to get to the problem. But the
yeah,
only thing is that
yeah.
if we allow ourselves to really develop it and not take the unknown as something scary or
Hmm.
something like, oh, a taboo or anything like that. We really have to come back to ourselves and really confront the narratives that we allow ourselves to be our truths, because what we believe is true can really limit us from
Hmm.
experiencing so much in life. Like we have like blinders on, not
Yeah,
allowing to turn, not allowing to look what's really there because
exactly.
of whatever reason they choose to be. But when we really allow normal to be set in, there's no such thing as normal. Normal
Exactly.
is just a routine that we have found comfort in, that we have found acceptable in the moment or in
Hmm.
the area. Because if somebody lives out in the woods in the jungle, their normal is going to be peeing outside by a tree. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's their normal. Just pick a tree and pick a bush. You know what I mean? Whatever it
And
is.
that's okay. Yeah. So it's
Exactly.
like developing that sense of openness to be like, you know what? I can let go of what I think I was supposed to, see things as, what I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to do. I can open up to, other possibilities. And that can bring you so many awesome things in life, aside from making connections with people like you, let's talk your professional life or, just long-term life goals. Like that can all open you up to so many other things that you would otherwise not even see.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like, once you finally open your eyes, you be like, it makes me wonder what else have I been closed off to? You know what I mean?
Yes,
The
yes.
opportunities are now endless because it's like,
Yeah.
oh, now I can shift here, now I can shift here, now I can like, oh, and we don't realize like our minds and our eyeballs are really just like moving around in like in a confined space. So it's like if you see a
Yeah.
ball and it's in a bracket, but it still has that the ability to still move. That's basically what we need to think of as our minds
Hmm.
and life. And it sucks because time is catching up to us, Danica. And I feel
I
like
know.
I could keep talking to you for hours on end. But what can be some lasting words that you can leave us off with to keep on thinking?
I would say just try and stay open and curious. When you think about normal, like just try to broaden like your perspective. And when something new comes your way, come at it with a sense of curiosity. And that'll just be the first step to opening up to new opportunity.
Yeah.
Openness and curiosity, I think, is the biggest
Yeah.
thing.
Just it holds so much value in our lives and it can change us in so many ways that we don't even realize. And it can really provide us so many different opportunities that we didn't even know were possible by just allowing our perspective to shift, by allowing that curiosity to be playful and exploratory and just
Yeah.
a good and in a good avenue. You know what I mean? Instead of looking at it in the negative end of the spectrum, there's a
Yeah.
positive end of the spectrum too. Just look at that
Yeah.
side and you can find
Yeah.
the beauty, you can find the wonders, you can find the joy, the life, the
Yeah.
experiences that you never even thought was possible by just having that switch of the flip of the switch of
Yeah.
just being more open and that
Yeah.
and just it opens
I
a whole
usually,
new avenue.
yeah, I actually usually dumb it down to like two questions instead of asking why, just ask why not.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it.
Yeah. And
Why
why
not?
not? Why not do it, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Why not be happy? I know. I remember my ex, he told me that I was the most optimistic person in the world and he hated it. And I was just like, why not be
Why is that a
optimistic?
problem?
Exactly. Like, well, how is that a problem for me? That sounds like a personal problem. So yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
totally
funny.
get it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, go check out Danica. I have access to her website, has access to all the great content that she has all over the world just so that you can continue on thinking, because isn't that the point? Yes, it is, just to continue on thinking. So with that being said, bye.